young white men with guns, and nobody reported that he bought 50 rounds of ammunition.
You're the cause of President Trump almost being assassinated. You're the cause of everything wrong
where's
in
your
America.
evidence of those claims?
No, you're done.
White people have a specific scent because they don't bathe every day.
The View hosts drop wild takes after the Trump shooting, a Republican freaks out on a reporter, and a TikToker has thoughts on how white people smell? All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across our politics and across the internet from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around. And if you're a returning viewer or if you're a new viewer, don't forget to hit that like button and do comment with your thoughts as we go along. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. So up first, we're all still kind of reeling from the attempted assassination of Donald Trump and the fallout that has ensued. In typical form, some of the media coverage has been genuinely unhinged and deranged and kind of loony, frankly. One of the biggest examples of this was the way that the hosts over at The View on ABC News, the panel of all women, decided to cover the aftermath of this event and discuss and make some bizarre political and racial statements attached to the Trump shooting. Thankfully, the ladies of The View did have the common sense and decency to, of course, condemn the assassination attempt and wish Trump well, and I'll give them credit for that, even though it's, again, an incredibly low bar. But then they went on to offer some pretty bizarre spin on the whole situation. Here's host Ana Navarro talking about how this is really all about white men or something.
And I also need to say, I hope that at some point in this country, we do have a conversation about what is happening, because we can't just react when it is our side. What was this again? It was, a 20-year-old lone wolf, white, whack job with easy access to a gun. And we have to have a conversation about that, because it wasn't a drag queen. It wasn't an immigrant. It wasn't a pissed off liberal woman. This keeps happening. And we need to react, not as left or right, not as Republicans or Democrats. We need to react as Americans.
So there's something kind of wild about calling for unity and reacting as Americans, but then immediately demonizing white men as a category. It is true that many mass shootings and public famous shootings are carried out by white men, sure, but 99.99% of white men will never do anything of the sort. And there's literally no other demographic group they would ever feel comfortable about generalizing and speaking about in this way. The hosts of The View would never discuss a crime wave that broke out in Chicago and say, another shooting by a black man. We would all know how tone deaf and how simplistic and how overgeneralizing and crude that would sound. Well, Anna, it's not somehow different just because you're talking about white people. And I'm not really sure what she means by easy access to a gun, seeing as the shooter reportedly so far, it is believed that he stole a firearm that his father had legally purchased. So having more barriers in place to obtain a firearm, like more background checks or waiting period or anything like that, like none of that would have had any effect. None of that's relevant here. It's frustrating how Ana Navarro was on one hand calling for unity and saying set aside politics, and then goes into drag queens and liberals and immigrants versus Republican white men and goes and makes it partisan and makes it tribal. And the whole clip just really, I found it so frustrating, guys. But this next clip was exponentially more ignorant. Take a listen to what host Joy Behar had to say.
According to a CNN report, a senior law enforcement official said that he bought 50 rounds of ammunition from a local gun store hours before the rally. Shouldn't that have been reported? Somebody buys a 20-year-old white guy? I mean, we've seen that many times now. Young white men with guns, and nobody reported that he bought 50 rounds of ammunition?
I'm genuinely stunned by the ignorance of this statement that was aired on national television. Babe, somebody buying 50 rounds of ammunition is an everyday common occurrence. That just means 50 bullets. That's just one box of ammo in most cases. It literally happens all the time, every day throughout this country. It's not some red flag or warning sign that somebody should be reporting to the police. You have to be so completely and hopelessly out of touch as a journalist or political commentator to get up there and pop off about something like guns with such profound ignorance. You have to be so out of touch with the American people. Somebody might use 100 or 200 or even 300 rounds just in a couple of hours at the gun range. If you're doing a basic pistol training course, they might ask you to bring 1,000 rounds. So buying 50 rounds isn't some red flag. And the fact that these hosts could say something like that and the rest of them not immediately realize how incredibly ignorant it is just shows once again how incredibly out of touch they are with the public. And again, with the white man thing, I just can't imagine a more divisive way to respond to this kind of national tragedy. I mean, what is Joy Behar advocating here exactly? For racial profiling against white men? So if a white woman buys 50 rounds, no big deal. If a black man buys 50 rounds, no big deal. But if you see a white man buying, one box of ammunition, somebody really should have tipped off the police? The delulu here, guys, is just off the frickin' charts. Yet somehow millions of people still look to this show, The View, for sober-minded, serious political analysis. One of the other hosts, Sunny Hostin, directly used this to push her political agenda.
I say no. I say now is the time to talk about the common denominator when it came to this assassination attempt is America's fascination and obsession with owning guns. And it just, that's the truth. And I'd like to think
they're rifles, they're
AR-15s and bump
rifles.
stocks. And the Supreme Court just found that it's fine to have bump
So
stocks.
ignorant.
And so I'd like to think that the issue of gun control would resonate now more. And but rather than that, I think what's going to happen is we're going to have more of this rhetoric of, had there only been more good guys with guns, this may not have happened. And so...
Well, the Secret Service had guns.
They had guns.
Those are the good guys.
And so, but my guess is they're going to say the Secret Service screwed up, if there were other people with guns. And I think that gun ownership will probably, because of this event, go up in this country instead of going down. And that is my fear. I think we need to have an honest and real conversation about real gun control legislation.
Okay. Well,
there's so much wrong here, it's hard to know where to begin. First and foremost, she said, just as a throwaway line, that the Supreme Court said it's fine to have bump stocks. No, you are literally a lawyer. You should have some basic literacy about what Supreme Court decisions mean. The Supreme Court ruled that if the government wants to ban bump stocks, which are a firearm accessory, they have to pass a law banning bump stocks through Congress, and that the president can't do it unilaterally all on his own. They did not say it's fine to have bump stocks or that bump stocks must be allowed. They simply upheld the proper separation of powers and our constitutional order. Now into the main point, which is using this incident in order to push your ideological agenda, your pro-gun control agenda. Well, this is totally unconvincing to me, as is really most of the time the case when you're just using one anecdote alone to push for a sweeping agenda. First and foremost, because the main issue here was not the existence of guns or gun culture in America. It was a complete and total failure by Secret Service to properly secure the president. And secondly, because the gun used in the shooting, the AR-15, as much as it's demonized by liberal media folks like the people at The View, is actually almost never used to kill anyone. There are more than 16 million AR-15s in the United States. But every year, only about 300 people are killed with rifles of any kind. So not just the AR-15, but any kind of rifle. That's fewer people than are killed with bare fists and blunt objects. And just doing some basic math, it means that 99.99% of all AR-15s are never used to kill anybody. So using one scary example to push a ban on AR-15s or other form of gun control isn't justified by the actual statistical reality we live in. It's emotional manipulation and fear-mongering. But unfortunately, that makes it pretty much par for the course for the ladies at The View. You guys let me know what you think of the clips I showed and of The View more generally in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button while you're at it. Up next, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene just clashed with a media reporter over the Trump shooting in a way that was interesting shall we say. A reporter from the Times of London and their radio division was at the RNC at their convention to cover the event and speak to prominent Republicans, and interviewed Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, the right-wing Republican from Georgia who is known for her eccentric views, shall we say. That interview did not go very well. We're going to play it and then discuss.
Trump, what do you think of his choice of J.D. Vance as vice president?
Very excited. I was the first member of Congress to endorse J.D. Vance when he was running for Senate. And I vetted him pretty closely, of course, because I'm one of those strong President Trump supporters.
This is a man who compared him to Hitler, though. Isn't that concerning?
Let me finish. I vetted him on his statements, his articles he'd written. And of course, you know, JD's an American. He can change his mind. And what changed his mind is he watched President Trump in his first presidency. And it was the policies and the decisions President Trump made in his first 4 years that changed his mind. And, you know, I really respect that. And I think Americans have the right to change their mind, especially based on someone's actions, not their words. And so when people are judging J.D. Vance, I think they can also look to see that we can watch his actions. And as a senator, I'm really proud of him. I'm proud of the legislation that he's voted on. I'm proud of the work that he's done on the committees he serves on. And I'm really excited President Trump picked him.
So Vance, he said that the UK could be the first Islamist country with nuclear weapons under the new Labour government. Doesn't that paint a sour picture for relations with the UK?
Well, let's talk about the words of the Democrats and Joe Biden that have also labeled President Trump as a fascist, labeled all of us as Nazis and Hitler, completely lied, demonizing him so much so that a young man, a 20-year-old, which is hard to imagine, actually climbed onto a roof and tried to murder President Trump.
You said that the Democrats wanted the shooting of Trump to happen.
Let's talk about people like you.
Where's your evidence
let's talk
of
about
that?
people like you
But where's your
that
evidence of those
demonize
claims?
people like me, President Trump. You know, I have some of the most highest amount of death threats because of people like you, because you choose to only take certain words from people, and then that's what you want to report. Shame on you. Shame on you.
But
Because
where's your
No.
evidence?
You're the problem. And where's this woman from?
The Times.
You're from the
London.
Times? Okay, you're ridiculous. And you're the problem in our country. You lie about people like me. This is the first time you've ever talked to me. I want you to know I'm a regular person like you. I'm also a mom. I have 3 kids. And we have to put up with the most unreal amount of bullshit because of little liars like you that take your job and turn it into political activism. Your job is the press. You should report the news, not lie. No, not lie about it. You don't get to ask any more questions. I'm done with you. Because you're the cause. You're
One
the
more
cause
thing. You
of
call
our
the
country.
Democrats a
No.
party
You're
of
the cause of
pedophiles.
our
Do you have any
country being
response to
divided.
that?
You're the cause of our country being divided. You're the cause of President Trump almost being assassinated. You're the cause of everything wrong
where's
in
your
America.
evidence of those claims?
No, you're done. You're done. Yeah, go back.
Thank
Go back.
you.
Is J.D. Vance going to be the candidate?
So that was quite something. And I got to be honest with you guys, I find Marjorie Taylor Greene's behavior during this interview wildly unprofessional, kind of deranged, and kind of unhinged. Now, of course, I think that mainstream media has a strong liberal bias. Of course, I think they're hyperbolic and unfair to Republicans. I've discussed all of that at great length. But to blame a reporter from the Times of London and say it's her fault that Marjorie Taylor Greene gets death threats or that Trump was nearly assassinated is absolutely baseless. It's the same kind of blood on your hands smear that people constantly throw at Republicans after mass shootings. There is no evidence that the shooter who tried to kill Trump ever listened to London-based radio or was somehow inspired by their content, which probably is somewhat more balanced than most mainstream American media, honestly. But regardless, even if it was wildly biased or unfair, it's still not their fault. They didn't pick up a gun, they didn't pull a trigger, they never told anyone to hurt anybody, and there's no evidence the shooter was ever influenced or even saw any of their content. So these are just wild, baseless accusations to be throwing out against journalists from a member of Congress. And secondly, she's throwing out all these charges against this reporter, but doesn't even know where they're from, which you'd think they would ask before agreeing to do an interview. But regardless, you're saying it's your fault that I have death threats. It's your fault Trump was nearly assassinated. You don't even know what outlet she's from. You had to stop and ask. In the same way that it's deeply irresponsible and dangerous for liberal biased media outlets like MSNBC to label Trump Hitler, it's wildly irresponsible for Republicans to accuse journalists of being responsible for murder while not even knowing anything about their coverage or what they've done, and certainly having no actual links between it and any actual acts of violence. Staying calm, cool, and collected, and just calmly refuting anything you see as biased questions or unfair framing is a much better way to handle these kind of interviews than whatever the hell we just watched from Marjorie Taylor Greene. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slug slugs.
Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Don't forget to hit that like button, yada, yada, yada. And now this TikToker has thoughts about how white people smell?
White people have a specific scent because they don't bathe every day.
Oh.
And even if they do, they don't use washcloths. And even if they do, they don't wash the bottom half of their body. On some now, the water going down will take care of that. No, it won't. Wash your crevices. If you take a shit every day, you wash your ass every day.
I just feel so unfairly maligned by this video. White people don't bathe every day. I can only speak for myself, but I certainly do bathe almost every day, sometimes twice a day if I exercise late at night or in the evening. And I absolutely do wash the bottom half of my body, although I don't use a washcloth. In fact, I think that's actually kind of gross and probably gathers bacteria or whatever. It is just so insane to me how they can openly speak about white people on TikTok in this deranged and stereotypical way, like all white people do this or all white people do that. Like, no, people are individuals. Why are we back to this? How is this woke? How is this progressive to suggest that some racial groups smell worse and have worse hygiene than others? Ma'am, what? This video got 67,000 likes, but also a fair bit of pushback. However, the creator only doubled down in her follow-up.
Black people also have a scent. They smell of food or soap. Y'all smell like your skin is screaming for help. Also, my video got to American TikTok. Donald Trump just got shot. You have better things to argue about. While you at it, also exfoliate. What the fuck?
So, like, on one hand, this stuff is funny. But if you think about it seriously, and it's at least meant somewhat seriously, they really do think it's okay in the name of progressivism or identity politics or wokeness or whatever to broadly speak about racial groups in this stereotypical and monolithic way. There is no way that white people smell or that black people smell. Individuals all have different levels of hygiene and habits and wear cologne or don't, or wear deodorant or don't, in which case you nasty. But it's like you can't draw these sweeping conclusions about groups of people, and in no other scenario would that be considered socially acceptable to do, especially on TikTok, where they're constantly canceling and tone policing and accusing each other of isms of various inclinations and sorts. But white people are like the one thing it's okay to just generally shit on. And I just think it's so divisive and toxic and stupid. And once again, y'all know I try to avoid appearances, but I just have to say, my rule that when you see that nose ring, that bull ass looking nose ring, you know you're about to see the worst take of your life. My rule stays undefeated. My record is it's 100% accuracy still. You guys let me know if you bathe daily as a white person or not, or if you're just one of those stinky whites in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button to reward my suffering. And now, before we wrap up today's episode, I'll read a few of your comments from yesterday's episode. One person writes, Brad, I'm gonna blow a gasket, not casket, LOL. Oops, my mistake on that one, guys. As I said that, I was like, wait, does that really make any sense? Blow a casket? But I just moved on, so thanks for the people that pointed that out. Another person writes, everyone should just start calling Destiny by his real name on his podcast. I mean, I guess, but I try to be respectful of people when I'm engaging with them and call them what they like to be called within reason. I do find it odd that a grown man goes by, he's like in his mid or late 30s or something, goes by like a gaming name or whatever, but I just generally try to call people what they want to be called within reason, to just be respectful and kind of set the stage for a civil dialogue. Another person says, Brad, calling for people to be unalived is illegal. And this is in reference to the conversation about cancel culture for the woman on Facebook who wrote, I'm sad he missed, or something to that effect, and then was fired from Home Depot. So a couple things. It's actually not illegal to call for violence, generally speaking, in America. To say that you wished somebody was killed is protected free speech. The only exception to that would be direct incitement of violence, but that has to be speech that is going to imminently lead to lawless action. Just vaguely suggesting that you would like someone to be killed or to die, while very evil speech, is in fact free speech, and it is not illegal in America. Another person says, I thought Brad was a good, freedom-loving American. Then he said he plays soccer. Yeah, that's probably my most woke trait, is that I don't like football and I really like soccer. So next thing you know, I'm going to be a vegan social justice warrior and dye my hair blue or something. Another person says the negative comments are the funniest. Maybe you should do a special reacting to idiotic comments. I have done a couple of videos like that in the past, but the problem is with the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, I don't get a lot of negative comments because honestly, most people only watch it if they enjoy my content. When I get a ton of good hate comments is when I go on someone else's channel for a debate or something. Then I get tons of funny comments that are hating on me or insulting me. And so the next time I do that, maybe I'll treat you guys to a hate comments reaction video. Another person says, when is your doctor boyfriend coming on the channel? Yeah, don't hold your breath waiting on that one because you might pass out. He likes to keep his life private, and we like to keep our private life private, separate from my public persona. So while I get you guys being interested, I do ask that you respect our privacy. All right, everybody, that is it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. Do subscribe if you aren't yet. Hit that like button on YouTube. If you're listening to us on audio podcasts or Spotify, which you can and should be doing if you listen on podcast apps rather than YouTube, do take a second to rate and review. It really helps us grow the show. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.